Thank you for joining Sports Development Series. We yours truly, Boma Ekiora.
Our Sportdev series is sponsored by Isreal Baobab Fruit Powder, one of the most nutritious substances on the planet. Get your Baobab Fruit Powder from IsraelBaobab.com.
Sportdev series. Welcome, guys. So, I think on our news today, when you look at the news and what's going on in the world today, one event jumps out over every other single one, and that would be the bombardment of the occupied Palestinian territories. When you look at it, it's clearly a powerful country bombing an area that doesn't even amount to being a country. At least they didn't give the Palestinians a state. But as it relates to sport, I was looking at it and just thinking to myself, because I saw an interview with musician Roger Waters. I believe he was on Empire Files, and he said that he believes the Israelis or the state of Israel should be banned from international sports competitions. And for me, looking at that, I thought to myself, well, should they be banned? Why should they be banned? And what kind of conditions qualify a country to be banned from international competition? I mean, we've seen it happen. I recently did a piece where Russian athletes and the Russian Federation were banned from international competitions. We do know that Russia lost out to the World Cup primarily because it was banned. Russian tennis players and Belarusian tennis players were banned. And that was a piece we also covered here on Sportdev. But if Russian was banned, the other case that we also have in point is the case of South Africa during apartheid. And the South African government was banned, and there was an open boycott of South Africa, and South African athletes and their teams were subjected to a variety of international boycotts, including sporting contacts. There was even a case where countries were calling for New Zealand to be sanctioned because the All Blacks were still playing rugby with South Africa. I recall a year after Nigeria had won the African Cup of Nations, it boycotted the subsequent African Cup of Nations, where it was supposed to be the defending champions, primarily because, of South Africa and apartheid. So we've seen these cases. And in the South African case, as it relates to soccer, football, they were banned from FIFA as well in 1961. And the South African FA proposed trying to enter an all-white team into the 1966 World Cup, and then an all-black team in 1970. But FIFA rejected that proposal. And then, in 1965, they were suspended and expelled from FIFA, right? So when you look at the Russian case, and then you look at the South African case, these two nations were banned. Russia more recently for the invasion of Ukraine and going into another country for whatever reason they were banned. We saw Ukrainian flags flying all around the world. Not too long ago, barely a year ago. This wasn't too long ago. This is not something that happened in 1940s. This is something that happened last year. So you look at that case, and then you look at the South African case, and you ask yourself, well, if those two cases apply, does what Roger Waters have to say hold any credibility in that the state of Israel should also be banned and excluded from all international sports, right? And in the case of South Africa, the ban was primarily because of apartheid, right? They were banned because it was discrimination based on race, segregation in sport, and apartheid in general, superiority of one racial group over the other. If that is the case, and I'm by no means an expert because I haven't gone to the occupied Palestinian territories or I haven't visited some of these places in the Middle East, but there are people who have. And two of the most respected organizations in the world when it comes to human rights and human rights abuses and protection of human rights are Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch. We typically see them being quoted in cases where certain dictators are killing their own people, in that case, or committing acts of human rights abuses. And in those situations, we've seen universal condemnation using the statistics or the quotes that come from these two organizations, particularly Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch. So I went and I looked up what Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch have to say about the situation right now and the history of the situation for that matter. So to see whether or not what Roger Waters is saying would qualify the state of Israel as a nation that should be banned from international sport. And what I found was particularly interesting is in last year, Amnesty International came up with a research and a report. And the finding of the report was that, the true extent of Israel's apartheid regime is what they quoted it as. They said whether Palestinians live in Gaza, East Jerusalem, or the rest of the West Bank, or Israel itself, they're treated as an inferior racial group and are systematically deprived of all their rights. Amnesty International also said they found Israel's cruel policies of segregation, dispossession, exclusion across all territories, including its control of the people, clearly amounted to apartheid. Now, keep in mind, the reason South Africa was banned was because of apartheid. Now we see an international organization that's very well respected, stating that what's happening between the Israelis and the Palestinians is apartheid, right? And then to further illustrate, I think the report from Human Rights Watch was a little bit more in detail, for lack of a better term. They went into a little bit more detail and talked about the 54-year history and how, when it comes to civil rights, access to land and freedom to move, build, or confer residency rights to close relatives, the Palestinians have been denied this for a very long time. That the state of Israel controls its borders, airspace, movement of people, goods, security, and registry of the entire population. That combined with the fact that they also stated in their report that international criminal law has developed two crimes against humanity for situations of systematic discrimination and repression. And these two crimes are apartheid and prosecution. Now, keep in mind, we already saw Amnesty International say in their report that they believe what's happening is apartheid, right? So I think finally the findings from Human Rights Watch was pretty much summarized in their report, and they essentially came up and said that on the basis of its research, they conclude that the Israeli government has demonstrated an intent to maintain dominance over Palestinians in the occupied territories, and that it's been coupled with systematic oppression, inhumane acts. And when you combine all of these together, they amount to the crime of apartheid. This is from the Human Rights Watch. And this report was done in 2021. This is practically 2 years prior to whatever is happening now. The Amnesty International report was done in 2022. So listening to a pop star make that comment is what made me look up these reports. But then at the same time, looking at the two other examples of the state of Russia and the apartheid state of South Africa, and the way international organizations, whether it be the IOC, FIFA, or whomever, ban these countries, the question still remains, and you have to ask yourself, if these two countries were banned, one for invading a sovereign territory, and the other one for the crime of apartheid, and now we see two respected international organizations call what is happening in the Middle East and the occupied Palestinian territories as apartheid. If that is the case, why isn't the state of Israel being banned? Anyways, food for thought. Sportdev here. Thanks for joining us. Hopefully we can find peace soon and everything turns out to be resolved. Take care.